Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our valued speaker and audience. I'm Pranjali Kaushik, and I'll be your host for CT Cyber Charcha webinar titled Zero Trust 2.0 Identity for Security in the Era of Multi-Cloud, Remote Work, and AI Agents. Before we begin, a few quick housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded. Your microphones will remain on mute during this session. Please use the Q&A box for any questions. We'll take them up during the Q&A session at the end. Polls will appear on your screen during this session. We'd request you all to please participate. I request all the participants to keep their mobile phones silent to avoid any distractions. Let's begin. AI has shifted from aspiration to necessity, but success demands more than just new technology. In this webinar, we'll explore how enterprises can protect both people and AI systems in a borderless, multi-cloud world while driving innovation and trust. And as we uncover how organizations turn AI vision into value, the real question remains, how do we do it securely? So let's begin this charcha. With me, I have Mr. Gaurav Ranade, a technology leader. He's a seasoned cybersecurity and AI expert with 28 plus years of experience offering strategic consulting services to enterprises, government agencies, and technology partners to design, modernize, and secure their digital ecosystems. Driving business transformation in consumer industries, he has led impactful roles across India, SAARC, Middle East, and APEC regions. His expertise lies in cybersecurity strategy and framework design, AI and infrastructure modernization, governance, risk and compliance, technical leadership, and solution architecture. So without further delay, I hand it over to Mr. Gaurav Ranade. Over to you, Mr. Gaurav.
Thanks, Pranjali. Very good afternoon to each one of you. Thanks for joining this webinar. Hope I am audible. So I'll just share my screen. Pranjali, if you can drop then, I can start sharing that screen.
Yeah, you can share now.
I'm still unable to do so. Yeah, now it's done. Just confirm that once my screen is visible and the presentation is ready in that format.
Yeah, it's visible.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Thanks, guys, for joining this session. That's that as the topic has been taken for Zero Trust 2.0, as we all aware of. That Zero Trust is a buzzword which was there in the industry for last couple of years. And the majority of the OEMs have involved and evolved their entire structure in and around that entire the plethora of the technologies. So everybody was moving towards a Zero Trust, that wherever you talk about, wherever the panel discussions, the industry presentations, the OEM, the government of India, as well as the whole world, has invested quite a lot in Zero Trust frameworks, and either be into the private access or the internet access. So everybody was asking about that, whether this entire the architecture or the solution has been evolved as well as in compliance with the Zero Trust. But over the period, what we have seen that the Zero Trust, so-called in one perspective, that the Zero Trust was not appropriately working, and then the many of the solutions which has been given on the basis of the identity-based Zero Trust, it wasn't working, because somewhere down the line it was trusting the one or the other way around. So what we have done, while just taking that for the last couple of months, if you might have followed the social media, the CISOs, the CIOs have raised certain concerns on the Zero Trust mechanisms, that how the industry has taken over with the specific tools and the technologies, but they were not able to take up this particular entire technique in that way. So today, what the topic for this webinar, we have decided that's a Zero Trust 2.0, that we are going one step ahead then of a 1.0 per se, and then this is the next version where you have to look at beyond identity, and then the how amalgamation of the different technologies, tools, and the frameworks, that to make it as that the mindset as a Zero Trust 2.0, you have to place it within your infrastructure to make it as a secure. So the agenda, what I have enlisted, I'm just taking few of the pointers, because zero trust is the one thing which we can discuss, we can talk on a day or on a longer versus that you want to speak for a number of hours, you wanted to chat, we can discuss, we can concern, we can debate on many of the topics or concerns for it. So how exactly these things will work out? So I'll in this particular webinar, we will try to address those particular pointers which are very concerns into the real scenarios and the certain use cases where we can discuss as that. So the agenda which we have limited, that's of a zero trust, the challenges in previous version, that's of a 1.0. How exactly the zero trust 2.0 functions, and what was the need to have it another version for it, and then the different reference architectures where we can discuss how these things can be worked out. So taking it forward from there, the challenges what we found, that the zero trust 1.0 could not keep up due to the multiple reasons, as well as the multiple factors were there with that, whether you wanted to design for on-premise and the perimeter-based environment. So you have to keep all these the internet access and the private access for different users. It was a very limited support for the cloud native SaaS or the hybrid models. Many of the times the different tools were not able to support on specific roles. That one way, the identity which has been given in a one part, the certain static rules and the policies which could not adapt to the real-time context. So the real-time scenarios which wanted to give it immediate that particular support, or that certain policies could not be implemented on the ground itself due to the lack of a basic connectivity, or the any kind of scenarios where it has to be deployed. The complex integrations across vendors, because it was not at all like as a seamless integration. Many of the times we also experienced that the adoption was quite slow and fragmented, that it was not at all taken into the consideration with many of the vendors altogether. And then finally, it has been assumed that identity verification was enough, that either were like as an ignored devices, the data and the behavioral signals for it. I'll give you one very small example with a couple of an OEMs. While my implementation of a few of architectures, I asked that how exactly this zero trust works and in which way. Just a couple of years back, when zero trust was coming into the architectures, while design very complex mega scale projects for that. So they said that it has to be on the Active Directory or a LDAP, where the identity which has to be taken care of. So if I ask that, if I said that like if in a case Active Directory or the identity is going to be compromised, then they said that the certificate authority servers are like as a legitimate to give the certificate only to the legitimate user with the continuous connectivity, and then get that authorization. So I said that if what happens that even if that certificate authority server got hacked. So the responses I got it very weird, but it was on the record. They said that the certificate servers cannot be compromised. So if you Google it, you find out that way back in 2011-12, the certificate servers even got hacked and compromised, and they were clueless on that part. So my concerns, apprehension started from that day itself, that these are the particular challenges where the identity is only looked at as a major component for the zero trust implementation. But when you looked into that, the day by day attack vector or the landscape is becoming quite huge, and becoming like as the bigger scope in coming days. And every single day we have that the new technologies, new threat actors are coming up in our infrastructure. So the limitations related to identity is not enough. So that when we look at the adoption of the zero trust, so what we thought, that organizations always focused on the zero trust as a multi-factor authentication and the VPN replacement. So many of the time that the vendors or the OEMs always refer as that the VPN is a one single solution, which is going to be that the zero trust is going to replace that and will make a secure solution. So many pre-sales or the sales profiles, they always refer to this particular solution to sell it as the VPN replacement, which was not at all a fully trust of architecture. Another example, I'll give it to you once for this VPN replacement, where we had that one of our very senior technical resource from an OEM, and it's like as the international OEM, they said that, that once the VPN is there, so from our solution, we did give a direct access to any external user to the databases back in militarized zone. So I immediately asked about that how exactly that you are bypassing the rule of a demilitarized zone or any kind of an authentication or authorization. So that seems to be like as a quite a mature response, but it shows that there are a lot of vulnerabilities. So while defining that architecture, as well as just sharing that particular solution itself. So I don't know that how many times that the zero trust has been implemented, and you have seen that. But I think it's a methodology how you have to replace on that part. The policy engines, which operated always in a silos, either network, identity, and application controls, which never sync with each other. So that's a major a gap in the implementation, because when you look at the zero trust as a whole mechanism which has to work and all the components and not to be dependent on each other, it's more like as that the independent entities, but the policies are not at all implemented all across with each other. The continuous validation, that's a major concern. And many of the times what we have seen, that the architectures, that then normally the system administrators or the security architects, they always follow the legacy implementation or the legacy architectures to deploy the zero trust. But it's a totally different architecture now all across, that you have to define a new structure, new architecture. The validation is totally different. Now, how exactly the perimeter, your application, your network are scenarios with a demilitarized zone, with a management zone, your security zone, as well as a militarized zone, how it has to be interconnected with each other, that need to be defined separately. So when you try to deploy it as a zero trust, that the way that the architecture which need to be deployed it into a certain sense, that I believe that this is going to be a big way that your approach, your methodology, how you design it, and how exactly you wanted to look at the visibility scenario. So the next one is limited visibility and telemetry across the workloads and cloud. So the on-prem scenarios is a separate all across, but when you look at the workloads and the cloud per se, that when it comes onto the hybrid multi-cloud scenarios, where the visibility was not at all appropriate, and the zero trust always found some difficulties with the existing vendor ecosystem. Manual configurations made enforcement very slow and inconsistent, and that's nowadays, while looking at that the mechanism of like as a bigger and complex scenarios, it actually made that the implementation was quite tough in zero trust 1.0, and the gaps are quite visible. When you look at the cyber landscape, which has changed, so the threats and environments we spoke about earlier, that the hybrid work, the AI, the multi-cloud, it is the traditional perimeter. So you have to look out that the next way that how my cyber landscape is totally changed, and we have to be resilient towards that the upcoming technology trends and the workloads which are coming day by day for it. So APTs and insider threats become context aware and persistent. So you need to be aware of those particular aspects, that how exactly those kind of an attacks which has been changed rapidly in coming days. IoTs and the OT networks added billion of unmanaged endpoints, and the legacy is a major component in that part. So our cyber landscape is becoming a quite horrendous on a day by day basis. The compliance demands are totally like as a huge, like every day we have a new compliance, while it's NIST, RBI, ISO. It totally depends on to your the nature of an organization with the industry, that be it into the manufacturing, with your BFSI, with the government, with the ISP, with the telcos. That it totally depends that what kind of an that the compliance you have to apply for it. So you have to align with all these particular technical resources, the different controls which need to be applied. It so attackers can exploit the implicit trust gaps and static control. So the cyber landscape, which has changed day by day, and it's in a huge where the threats and the environments have totally changed. So the zero trust in that mechanism, it was totally collapsed. So what was the need? What was why we wanted to have this zero trust? So the gaps we understood. So I think it's a mechanism, and it's more like as the way that the technology has been taken a shift. It's a totally the shift which has been taken into the next level, where we wanted that whatsoever the learnings we have seen into 1.0, it was a deficit, and that's why you have seen that the growth of exponential growth of the zero trust based organizations, they have gone up to the quite huge. They dipped into a very slight way, and now that the people are either moving out of those organizations because they found it very stagnant position, and as well as a very monotonous way, because they could not control it towards a customer that to keep up those particular promises. And then there is now a shift of a zero trust, and we call it as a zero trust 2.0. So we now have to move from identity only to context aware adaptive trust, and it should be the continuous verification across the users, devices, and workloads. So if you resemble with the similar kind of user devices and workloads with the earlier more like as a certification of authentication services, where we always looked into the user services and the computers mechanism for it. So the similar way, if you look at the computer continuous verification, which we have to do it for all across with each and every single control. So all the components, all the devices, all the workloads had to make a contribution while authentication and authorization of every single request. AI is driving the major component in coming days. I believe that it's again a phase where we are evaluating AI within our the next level of a technology evolution. Many of the manual stated activities are going to be totally taken over by AI. So AI is going to drive a major role while implementation of a zero trust, because authentication or authorization is going to be automated, and the risk scoring for the dynamic policy reinforcement. So it has to look at the certain baselines which has been provided to any users for any system or any workload, and then to give those particular that reinforcement which has to be done for any risk, which is more like is a proactive one, where you can notify and can be get it. So integration of your data protection, automation, and analytics at the core. So it means that whatsoever the AI component we have talked about, it has to be a part of your protection, automation, and analytics. So whatever the attacks are going to become, like more into the analysis, which has to be taken care by all these particular user devices and workloads in multi-cloud or multi infrastructure based scenarios. So then the unified policy across the multi-cloud, SaaS, and on-prem environment. So when you look at the zero trust 2.0 from all the parameters, that these are the 5 pointers what we discussed, that how this entire shift has to be taken into. So when we look at that from static trust to a dynamic uh, defense for the zero trust 2.0, the evolutionary the leap is, if you look at the focus area, what we look at the zero trust 1.0 and 2.0 as a comparison for it, the verification was one time the user base, but now in 2.0 what we are looking at as a continuous contextual and AI driven. So AI has to make it as an automated process rather than you have to wait for the next action or a next a kind of a decision to be taken care of. Enforcement, which is earlier it was a manual, what now it's more like automated and adaptive, which just we spoke about. The visibility is a network centric in 1.0, but now we want to look at the end to end. It's a identity and then data. So if you look at that from any architecture or from any infrastructure scenarios, what we are expecting that from the point of the infrastructure to be entered, that's of your identity, who the user wanted to access that, up to the last mile, that's of your data centers militarized zone where that the data kept. So every single information has to be visible towards a zero trust 2.0, and then to look at that how these information had to be addressed appropriately. The architecture earlier, it was purely on a perimeter dependent, but now it's a cloud native, hybrid ready, and wherever you would like to deploy it, be it into like as a SIM, the on-prem with the cloud, multi-cloud with the hybrid mode for that. So it's a totally different, not at all to be seen from the perspective of a legacy. So my statement is very carefully, I'm just defining it that within that existing legacy infrastructure, you have to define the zero trust architecture. So earlier we used to define that entire the traffic flow architecture for any data center or any flow on that part. So we always place to have a security architecture. But now there is another term which we always find out that whenever I'm just going to write an RFP or any proposal, so it's my architecture as a traffic flow for a data center. There is a security architecture, and now there's a zero trust architecture where you have to show that this is a framework, what we have deployed. Security is a separate one on the security endpoints or the security perspective on a technology side, but there is a zero trust architecture which you have to submit it to the customer or the partners or the prospects for it. The response earlier was reactive, but now it's more like as a predictive and self-learning with the help of an AI. The need for zero trust 2.0. So why this shift has been was essential. The digital boundaries have disappeared now. When you look at that, what is the borders? What are the limitations that I do have it for my digital infrastructure? So there is no limits. I don't know that which way this is going to be stopped, but any kind of a communication, any kind of a scenarios which to be taken care of. AI, multi-cloud, and remote work have reshaped this entire security. So you have to be very predictive. You need to look at that which way my threat landscape is going to react. Any of a threat actor is going to react on a few of the components. The static controls can't stop the dynamic threat. That's very sure. So that is why we need to have it like a zero trust 2.0. And finally, the identity and data are now the new parameter. So identity itself is a big thing. I'm not going to demean that the role of our identity in any amplification of this entire structure, but data remains like as the gold for entire discussion. But identity is a key factor. So the identity makes that entire information to be secure. That what kind of a roles, the responsibilities, and the metrics which you have to define it for different users to access that data. But the concern is that while looking at the zero trust, that how you have to place both the components carefully, and that was essential. That how you have to take all the components in such a way that the technologies have to be taken into the next level. So when you look at that from the evolution from the zero trust 1.0, or more like as you call it as an evolution, or you have to transform the zero trust 1.0 to 2.0. So you look at that it was from manual to AI driven validation, perimeter to identity centric control, and the final is static to continuous context assessment. So it's more like as the adaptive trust and intelligence on major factors when you look at the trust which need to be defined it from all the devices or the components or the controls while you are deploying it with any of an part of an compliances, that's more like as a part of that role itself. The core pillars, what we have to look at, it's a more from the verify the explicitly authentication in every interaction that has to be defined it, enforce the least privilege with the limit access dynamically, assume that there is a breach, so you have to design that if there will be any kind of a compromise, that you need to look at that there is going to be a breach. So it's a proactive, predictive mode that if there'll be any of a breach in that aspect, how you exactly have to look into. The continuously monitoring, where you need to detect, learn, and adapt. So how the anomaly detection procedure is going to work, that will be a part of a continuously monitoring for it. So if you look at that, the verify explicitly, enforce least privilege, assume your breach is happening, continuously monitoring is there, and automate and respond. So if you map it with all these particular tools, so verification and for every single authentication, it's with the identity, the least privilege, which you have to do it, you have to make it with the identity itself. Assume there is a breach for it, then you have to look at the firewalls or the IPS in that part. Continuously monitor, you have to do with the detection, learn, and adapt for it. It's a continuous threat exposure management with the CTAM perspective. Automate and respond either with the SOAR or with the SecOps scenarios, the security operation kind of a tool. So if you look at that the mapping of all these particular tools in a zero trust scenario, I believe that this is going to be a quite crucial for it. So what's new in zero trust 2.0? What we believe it It's a real-time behavioral analytics. So it's like as an immediate, it will check it on the real-time scenarios that what is the behavior for any packets, any identity, any device. So it's not limited towards only a one single component. It's a continuous adaptive risk assessment. Immediately will look it into those the risks which have been associated with it, AI and automation and decision loop. So so continuous that the kind of a process which has been taken care of with the cloud workload protection, with the CWPP and CNAP, that everything is working into a tandem process where that the approach and the mindset you have to take in that way, with the API level visibility across the SaaS and IaaS. So many of the times are the APIs which has been integrated, and our technologies nowadays in any infrastructure or in any of the SecOps scenarios, that the APIs played a quite crucial role in that part. So if you look at that now in the first phase, we have discussed about that what were the challenges of the the zero trust 1.0, and then now in what are what was the need to have that zero trust 2.0, and how to take it forward from there itself. So this is a time for a poll time, quiz one. I hope that you might have got some basic idea about the zero trust 1.0 and 2.0, what is the need, why we'd like to have it. And it's a small a couple of minutes break where you have to go through the one of a quiz. Pranjali will take it forward from there itself, and we'll get back on the next mode for this present webinar. Pranjali, hands over to you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Gaurav. All right. So a poll is being displayed on your screen now. It's live now. So I'll request all of you to please participate. So this poll will be there on your screen for a few seconds. I request everyone to please participate. Ten more seconds to go, and we'll close this poll. All right, we are closing this poll. Over to you, Mr. Gaurav.
Okay. Thanks, Pranjali. My screen is visible, right? Am I audible, Pranjali?
Yes, you are.
Okay, perfect.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so now we are going to discuss about the architecture, the reference architectures for the Zero Trust 2.0. So when we look at that one scenario where normally that any of a data center, it's a data zone where the most like as the users are going to be connected, and then it's more from the perspective of any connectivity like the internet or MPLS zones for it. And then finally it landed onto a perimeter zone. From the perimeter, it's going to be a demilitarized zone with a management zone, with your network zone, and then your security zone and the militarized zone for that part. But when we look at that from the architecture of a zero trust, so it means that either you have to take it as an internet access or a private access for multiple users, how exactly they have taken into any of a way. But now it's more like as a gateway. When we look at the zero trust gateway scenarios, any request which is coming up on your platform. That platform will take it forward towards their core engine, and then they have to process those particular policy engines and then validate and enforce those particular policies, and then to define it back into your systems. So when we look at that, the enterprise and the government scenarios, these are the two different kind of an architectures, because on-prem architecture is a totally different from your enterprise or the cloud scenarios, or a purely cloud or a hybrid. It's a combination of the on-cloud along with the on-prem solutions. So the structure is totally different. So case-to-case basis, if you look at that many of that the scenarios where your packets are getting onto the platform which is over the cloud, it enforce those particular policies, get back into your system. So be careful on those particular part, that how your data has been taken over the cloud with the multiple companies, how to access that. We know that the compliances which has been addressed appropriately, and then how these policies which has been defined it with the different devices altogether, and then the data is taken care of. So while we are taking those particular architectures on that way, and we have seen that what we need to have it's a continuous exposure, continuous monitoring, and with the AI, it has to look at into each and every component for it. So we need to calculate on those particular part as well, because while looking at a small organization, it will not be so visible, because we started with the 10 Mbps or 1 Gbps of our network connectivity. But when we look at the complex scenarios or a mega scale projects, so every transaction or every flow is going to have its own logs and going to contain it within that within that particular storage, and then it's more like as a burden as well on many of the storage or the system admins jobs for that. So you have to look at the entirety in a architecture. So when you look at this diagram, so what we wanted to say, that though it is that with the Zero Trust 2.0 architecture, we define it that all these things have to be in a continuous tandem mode with all these particular components, and the architecture has to be defined into a seamless integrated approach. You also need to look at that whenever you are designing or architecturing any of the sizing of those components had to be appropriately. So be it into any of the components, be it into like as a NTAPT with the DLPs, with the vulnerability assessment and penetration testing tools, with the patching upgradation or the staging server for that, with the DNS, with the DHCPs of the world altogether, and then many of the multi-factor authentication, AAA log, or the other servers itself. So when we look at the entire architecture, it's a more from that every component is going to be integrated with the zero trust engine for it. So in every architecture, it's a different use case, different altogether. But how exactly the core engine is actually taking care of that, it's taking all these particular packets as well as the integration with the zero trust gateway. This depicts it. So when we look at the reference for Zero Trust 2.0 with the NIST SP at 800-2007 aligned. So if you look at all the different planes with the control plane or the policy and the telemetry plane, that how exactly the flow has been taken care of, and the way that the workloads or the data with the users have been taken off. So the components either with the SIEM, with the threat intel, with the CMDB, SOAR automation, identity providers, the multi-factor authentication, DLPs, or the certificates, PAM, IAM, or JIT, the vulnerability management, or the observability telemetry, that need to be defined on the basis of that how exactly the request flow has to be. So if you look at the authentication with the posture verification, then authorization with the least privilege, continuous monitoring, and the reauthorization. So that loop is going on, that every single time it's going to be taken care of with all these particular components. But when you look at the control plane for it, so it's a policy enforcement points you have to take it, the policy decision points which need to be taken care of, and the policy admin and catalog for it. So workloads, it's a users, devices, apps, or APIs workloads which will take it entire information. So from the layer of the lower side of the layer that the data is taking on towards a control plane, and then after the policy and the telemetry for the different applications. So these particular reference architectures can be defined if time permits, and the next time if the next webinar, we will discuss about any of a couple of use cases where I can show few of an architectures where the Zero Trust 2.0 has actually been designed and implemented as well. The reference architectures, which I'll share that the users and devices where how the posture validation been done, the policy engine, which is on a location-based access, or the context and risk, the network, which is a micro-segmented communication that normally when we wanted to have it any of it designed for that, so it's a micro-segmented communication which has to be placed in, and the finally analytics as a sensor with the feedback loop for it. Your identity is a new parameter, which we already have discussed that it's going to give a fuel towards cybersecurity postures nowadays. And then if it's a major parameter, if nowadays taking it on cyber threat landscapes, so identity is restricting many of attacks in the very primitive jobs itself. So the unified identity fabric with adaptive authentication is going to make a major mark. Integration with the identity governance, with the PAM and the SIM, SIEM, and then the dynamic session trust scoring with the behavioral driven control on that particular part. So it's a more from the portion of that how exactly you have taken identity in that part. The micro segmentation is in a practice nowadays that you might have interacted as well as designed within your infrastructure as well. It's a majorly like as a restricted east-west lateral movement, define the protection surfaces per workload, and enforce the software-defined networks and workload-based policies. So it totally depends on to how you define it, the leaf spine or the legacy structures which you have to define it. But when you look at that from the entire network and other architectures, the micro-segmentation is going to be there for majority. Our continuous monitoring and threat detection is AI-based anomaly detection, which has to be majorly done by the OEMs, majorly done by the different products. But when look at that from the endpoint identity and network telemetry, that also need to be a part of. So there are a few of the tools which are available in the market, which does that the continuous the threat landscape that actually look at that the entire attack path vector, which are the loopholes, which are the pointers where your entire endpoint identity or network telemetry by assessing that which are the loopholes which have been taken into the consideration by any of an attacker within your infrastructure and can be vulnerable for your upcoming attacks. Automated mitigation by SOAR and XDR, and now by days it's a SecOps, because SOAR also have been delimited by Gartner by saying it that there is a very limited scope for the SOAR and the playbooks in such a way where the SecOps can take over in next way. AI and automation, we are in Zero Trust 2.0, in my purview, that as per my understanding, that it's a predictive posture management, which is going to be helped by AI, and automatically that entire process with the re-authentication, and that to look at that how exactly the posture management had to be assessed by AI itself. The policy is self-tuning by machine learning. So if there is any of fine-tuning to be done within any of policy, that also can be implemented with the AI and real-time access decisioning. So if there is any kind of the decision to be make it immediately in a perspective of the self-healing process, that the AI also can do that. So hybrid and cloud environments. So when you look at the Zero Trust, it's a consistent policies need to be deployed it across AWS, Azure, GCP, or any in-house or in country-based the data centers or the cloud scenarios. The integration with the CNAP, CSPM, and CASB, that also been done, and visibility into the shadows of IT, SaaS, and API exposure. That's majorly looking into the hybrid and cloud environments. Data-centric Zero Trust, when we talk about that, it means that the data must be encrypted at the rest as well as in a motion and while it's in a use. So if you look at that aspect of a Zero Trust, I believe that this is going to be make some quite improvement while we are making that data to be secure enough, and discovery and classify the very sensitive data that you need to segregate in that aspect. And finally, inline access governance with the DLP integration, which majorly, most of the time, the DLP is just only for the namesake, been deployed in many of the organizations. So if you apply these three three pointers towards the data-centric zero trust. So I believe that half of your problems have been resolved from the perspective of a zero trust. When you look at that from the IoT and the OT scenarios, you need to look at that how the device profiling and isolation can be done. Context-based access, you can give it to the IoTs or the OT devices for connected assets. And finally, the protecting SCADA ICS environment securely. This is more from that to secure your devices in OT and IoT on a zero trust scenarios. Now, this is the time for the poll time quiz too. Pranjali, over to you.
Yes, thank you. All right. So we are launching the second poll on the screen now, and I'll request everyone to please participate. There's a lot of active participation in the poll. I would request all the other participants also to please fill in their responses so that we can tailor our webinar and future programs accordingly. Last 10 seconds and we will close the poll. Thank you everyone for participating. Over to you, Mr. Gaurav.
Thanks, Pranjali. So now we are into the last phase of this webinar where we discuss about so far about what is the use, how exactly we need to take it for the Zero Trust 2.0. Now, what is the way to implement? What is the roadmap for that? So the third session where I'm just discussing about that, how exactly once we understood that what were the challenges in 1.0, what are the things we have to do it into 2.0, and what are the implications as well as the way you have to do it. Now it's a more like as that you have to assess your current security maturity, that what level of maturity you have within your infrastructure. You need to identify the crown jewels and risk zones. So it means about that where the data is going to be kept, where the exactly your entire information is going to be secure. What are the zones which you need to secure it? What are the parameters where you want to define it? Your zero trust need to be appropriately looking into. You need to build the unified identity plane for it. So you have to look at that there is an identity plane where the different mode or the mechanisms of your identity solutions, be it into the AAA with the radius, with the Active Directory, with the LDAP, and many other modes where you wanted your entire infrastructure has to be looking into, that you have to make it as that identity plane altogether for it. Deploy adaptive access control, how the access control mechanism you have to look into, and then finally automate your monitoring and policy refinement. So the documentation once done, that the roadmap is defined. So the challenges while we looking into that at that point in time for any implementation, the first thing is always the legacy system interoperability. So you have to define it, that which are the different components of the devices which have to work all across. Skills and the cultural alignment, that how exactly this need to work all together. Continuous policy validation. You have to look into those particular policy validations every time, because there are lots of change management or the change requirements which need to be defined, and balancing user experience with the security. So users always complain about that this is not happening, this is not working. These are the particular devices which I need to access it without these particular policies all across. So these are the challenges, the common challenges, while we on the other side of the table, being as a CISO, being as a system admin, being as a security admin, we have to look into the ease of the use for the users itself and how the accessibility to be defined. By in that cases, so we know that there are the real world use cases from the vertical wise, be it into the BFSI, the government, the healthcare, the manufacturing, and there are many verticals or the domains where we have to define. So basically, if you look at that from the BFSI, we wanted to have it for the fraud prevention and the secure transactions. The government cases are like the critical infrastructure and defense. Obviously, the healthcare is a patient data protection. Like recently, whatsoever, the couple of years back, that the prominent healthcare institutes got under ransomware attacks. They didn't have that the basic infrastructures. We cannot anticipate that the zero trust principle to be applied in those scenarios. And manufacturing, which is the OT and IT network isolation, which are the different use cases where we can define it. But definitely, in coming series, we can also looking into all these particular architectures of the different verticals and the domains, and then to define it how the zero trust can reduce the kind of a threat perceptions as well as a prediction on that part. When you look at the business outcomes, what is the maximum measurables we can look at? So if you apply it like with the Zero Trust 2.0, what we anticipate that the lateral movement incidents near about to 60%, you can reduce it. With the 45% of the mean time to respond, that's also can be reduced. Whereas the excess policy compliance with multiple compliance scenarios, you can increase that number by 70%. That's an assumption. It can depend on multiple organization to organization or scenario to case to scenario basis that to be defined. It audit and regulatory readiness, that definitely is going to come by with this particular zero trust framework, which you need to define it. The future, if you look at the zero trust 2.0 is not going to be the end of this entire era. There'll be another future. What it could be with the AI native and quantum resilient frameworks, which we can define it in coming years. Policy as code for orchestration, that also to be defined it, and self-healing networks and autonomous resilience. Definitely, I think this is going to be work out as a part of research, which we are already working on it. It's a beyond zero trust 2.0, and looking forward that autonomously that will be worked across. The closing note for this webinar for me is Zero Trust 2.0 is not a framework. It's a mindset. You have to apply your mind at every point in time while defining any architecture, that it's not just the framework you have to follow it. It's just about the mindset that everything which has to be in a continuous movement, continuous authentication and authorization, and then each and every single control need to be validated without trusting any other component. So that's a mindset you have to apply it while designing any architecture or any set. So it defines how modern organizations think, act, and evolve. That this is only the way where we can take the secure world altogether. So here comes the third quiz. Hand it over to Pranjali, and then we can take the question and answers for this webinar from all of you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I would like to first thank Mr. Gaurav for those valuable insights. So it's time for the third poll on the screen now. So I request all the participants to please participate in this. In a Zero Trust 2.0 architecture, which component plays a central role in real-time decision-making for access requests? I request all the other participants also to please fill in their responses. Last 10 seconds and we will close this poll. Thank you everyone for participating. Okay, so before we move to our Q&A session, So we'd really value your feedback. So please take a moment to please fill out this quick poll on your screen. This will help us improve our future sessions. Also, we are also collecting short video feedback after the Q&A. So if any one of you are open to it, just drop in a message in the chat and we'll bring you live. Last 10 seconds and we'll close this poll. Thank you everyone for participating. And here comes the last poll of the session. Would you be interested in joining future CT Cyber Charcha webinars and conferences? Last 10 seconds and we are closing the poll. Thank you everyone for your participation. Okay, so we are open for questions now. So if in case you have any query, so you can post it in your in the question section. So we already have 5 questions. So I'll read it out to you one by one, Mr. Gaurav. You can address it. Yeah. So first one is from Prakash Shah. So multi-cloud versus hybrid cloud. What's the difference and why does it matter?
Okay. Uh, multi-cloud, just repeat that, multi-cloud versus?
Hybrid cloud. What's the
Okay.
difference and why does it matter?
Okay. So when you call it as a multi-cloud, it's like the multi-vendors, multi-vendor based clouds like as AWS, GCP, and the Azure instances, which where you have deployed and the entire infrastructure has been taken. But when you call it as the hybrid, multi-hybrid cloud scenarios, it's the when it comes down to the hybrid, it won't be like the multi-hybrid cloud instances. It will be a hybrid of a on-prem and the cloud scenarios. Might be a typo error, or might be there is another set of a question which you wanted to ask there. But it's a combination of a cloud and on-prem solutions.
Okay. So next we have how does zero trust interact with artificial intelligence and machine learning in cybersecurity?
See, artificial intelligence is more that every single tool has been invoked with the AI entire infrastructure, and that every tool has been incorporated with AI. The artificial intelligence is just equipped with the different learning modules where that it got the data to be learned and how exactly it has to be taken by that tool itself with their own functionality. So any tool which is taken care of for any security infrastructure, that the tools are available, and AI is a part of for these particular generation tools itself. So if there is a legacy tool which is beyond like as a 2021 or 22 onwards, beyond that particular period, that would not be appropriately interacted with the AI. But nowadays, that every single tool is integrated with AI and is taking that the whatsoever the data has been captured by the tool itself or your security infrastructure is getting their own intelligence and learned by the different mechanisms and doing appropriately whatever the work or the task has to be defined for that.
Okay. So next up we have what the integration of AI in zero trust.
I think similar kind of a question that the zero trust, as it's a mindset. Earlier we call it as a framework. Many of the times, the many tools, the many websites, and the different blogs have been mentioned that you have to apply this, or that, and there it's more like the internet access or a private access. Yeah, this is framework which you have to deploy it. Your data will be integrated in such a way where this entire information need to be taken care of. But when you look at nowadays as a zero trust, that every single component or a framework which to be defined it within your perimeter. So the AI is playing in every single part, be it into your the data-centric software, application security software, your NAC, your DNS, your DHCP, your security mechanism, your SIMS or UBA, your XDR, MDR, EDR. Everything is going to have their AI. So when you try to deploy a zero trust, the zero trust is not from a technology per se. It's about the framework or the mindset you wanted to apply. Even without a zero trust tool, you can apply a zero trust architecture.
Okay, so next up we have how does AI affect our identity?
AI affects our identity. Totally out of the scope. I think out of the box, this question has been asked. AI nowadays is not going to impact my identity till the time you are not exposed to AI. If you have uploaded your images, your videos over Chat GPTs or Gemini or any Perplexity GPT tools or towards the AI definitely is going to impact your identity. You can look like as anything. If I look like as a Bollywood actor or Hollywood actor, my identity can be changed. Now, in terms of a technology, if you look at that, LDAP or Active Directory or any of an identity for AI per se, that totally depends on to how your roles, your responsibilities, your activities, your behavior, which has been taken by AI itself, will understand that if you do the job by 9 to 6 or someday suddenly you'll go by 9:30 in the office and will log in into your system, AI will let you know that this is not the time when you have to apply it.
Okay. So next question, we have some questions in the chat box as well. So how do you incorporate zero trust in regulating AI?
Hey, I think this is quite cumbersome. This is somewhere that even researchers are trying to work on. Zero trust will not be in a position to regulate the AI. AI itself is a separate concept altogether. While there is a positive way, like as the very predictive way how you have to utilize the AI, but there is an offensive way of utilization of an AI itself. So if I'll say that like as a GPT is going to give me all the answers for my emails, my essays, my day-to-day routine letters, but there is another GPT or that another way to handle it that you can write the virus, the worms, the Trojan horses, the ransomware, the different APT files to generate by any of an APTs itself, GPTs itself. So the zero trust has nothing to do with the regulation of an AI, as long as I know about it. Though I have been certified on a 42,000 of AI in ISO standards, but zero trust is to be applied within your infrastructure. How the entire traffic flow had to be taken care of, and then to authenticate and authorize on that part. But zero trust in regulating AI, it's a quite cumbersome. I think it's a good topic which need to be taken care for the research itself.
Mhm. Okay. So next up we have, does any single technology provides zero trust framework, or there has to be fabric of multiple ZTA technologies?
Can you repeat the last line?
Or there has to be fabric of multiple ZTA technologies?
Let me be very honest this for this question. See, earlier even I had that particular question about the zero trust, that how the one single technology can claim about that they are providing the framework of a zero trust. As I given my example in my initial slides itself, that there is nothing like us that the zero trust to be acquired by one single technology or OEM, and then to say that this is my tool. If you apply it, then the entire zero trust to be implemented. So don't be dependent on technologies. Don't be dependent on technologies by one OEM or the another one, or if someone claims that my product is a zero trust. Zero trust is it's just only a word they have taken it to sell their product. I'm not promoting or I'm not demeaning any of an OEM for them because they have done their research on that part. But technically, if you look at that, it's a methodology you have to apply. Let's assume that if by the time the zero trust technologies were not there, you make some attack or bulletproof kind of the data centers where nothing can be breached. Your IP addresses could not be available for that. So it's a mechanism where you try to hide your entire internal systems from the external attackers. So it wasn't required to have a technology like as a zero trust or any of us internet access or a private access. I'm not taking the name of a few of our vendors because otherwise they can come back to me and to ask that why you defame on any of a webinar. Just to make sure that without these particular zero trust technologies, you can deploy a zero trust architecture. That's it. No dependency of any zero trust technology per se or a fabric of the multiple ZTA technologies as mentioned in the chat. So I'm just taking the name as a ZTA. But there isn't any of a fabric of technologies you have to apply it for the zero trust to make it as a zero trust framework.
Okay. Okay, so next up we have how should organizations prioritize zero trust initiatives when resources or budgets are limited?
Okay. Again, I'm saying that when you have to procure any tool, you have to ask for a budget. If you don't have to apply for a technology and specifically for those like as an internet access or a private access, you can do it with the few of a tweaks with your existing infrastructure. So if you need any services or advisory on that part, we are available. We can guide you that how you can with existing infrastructure you can make that zero trust environment without any further investment to be done on any other platform for it. So that also can be done without any further investment and with limited resources.
So, yeah, just one last question. Will Zero Trust 2.0 eventually merge with data privacy frameworks like GDPR or DPDP to form unified governance?
It is a part of already all stated governance models. See, when you look at that, let's take an example of ISO 27001. You have almost 94 controls, right? So very well those particular controls with the high availability, with all these particular single point of failure. If you maintain those mechanisms, the security infrastructure to be maintained. So zero trust was already there. It just need to only evaluate that which particular component fallen into that category and your entire architecture be secure in that part. So zero trust 2.0 to merge with the GDPR or with the DPDP. DPDP is purely in a data privacy with the GDPR itself in the one of a region for your data protection for that. So I won't say that it will merge with those particular compliances, but it will definitely help to implement both of the frameworks, the privacy frameworks, to make it as a unified governance. But it will not be merged with these compliances.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gaurav, for addressing all the questions. So with this, we end our today's session, and I would like to extend my gratitude to Mr. Gaurav Ranade for taking out time from his busy schedule to grace the session. And I must thank all the participants for their participation. This webinar was part of CT Cyber Charcha, Channel Technologies Thought Leadership Series that brings you unbiased, brand agnostic insights on transformative IT topics shared by leading industry experts. We look forward to welcoming you to future sessions of CT Cyber Charcha. Until then, stay curious and stay connected. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, Pranjali, for having me for this webinar. Pleasure.
Thank you.